Right, fight fans, welcome to another edition of Eastwick Boxing UK. As always, Eastwick Boxing UK is in association with Three Kings Boxing and sponsored by The Movement. My very special guest today on the air, I've got British Light Heavyweight Champion Frank Buglioni. Frank, how you doing, man?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for being here. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. For those that don't know or that have been living under a rock, Frank defends his British Light Heavyweight Championship on March 24th at the O2 live on Sky Sports against Callum Johnson. It's a fight that was rescheduled from last year. Frank, how's prep going?
It's been fantastic. I mean, obviously I was meant to fight Callum Johnson October 28th last year. But he pulled out with an injury with a couple of weeks to go, so we had a late replacement in Craig Richards, who is a very good fighter, a little bit taller. So he's a lot different to Cam Johnson, but that didn't affect my performance. I went in there, done a job on Craig Richards, and I thought I won convincingly. Tried out a few new things, and I've kept the momentum going. I had a little bit of a rest after that fight, and as I say, I've trained all over Christmas, December. And I've hit the ground running, and I'm in a very good place mentally and physically.
What does a typical camp actually look like for you, Frank? Because generally, I mean, just judging by yourself, you're usually in fighting shape most of the time. I mean, you do get some fighters that typically tend to balloon in weight. Some do, some don't. You tend, by the looks of things, you don't. But is there a sort of specific time frame that you usually stick to camp? I mean, is it a 10-week, 12-week, or is it a depending on what type of challenge you've got in front of you, you might make that camp a little bit longer?
Yeah, I mean, it's all down to the individual. But for me, I tend to have strength programs running throughout the year, and they kind of coincide with my fight camp. So I'll have a strength training program going on regardless of fight dates, and then when I have a fight date, then I'll change it and taper it so that it coincides with my boxing training. And as soon as I'm in camp, I mean, I'll be in the gym ticking over. I won't really be sparring. And then once I get the fight date, I get them 8 weeks before the fight. Then I'll start my sparring. I'll start stepping up the rounds. Then I'll include the strength with it as well. Then I'll pick the running up too. So yeah, kind of fight camps. They're a bit of everything. And then obviously you then start making weight 3-4 weeks before the fight, and start sharpening up, and your mood changes too. So I would say, yeah, the fight camp is more specific, more boxing oriented, and then just kind of your personality and your psychologically you change.
Good stuff. How are you feeling? Because I mean, you've been at light heavyweight now. I mean, you fought Hosea Burton December 2016.
Yep.
Obviously, you had a fight against Oleg Fedotov before that in the March of 2016. How are you feeling? Is light heavyweight your weight? You seem to be doing a hell of a lot better and managing it a lot better at light heavyweight. I mean, do you feel that the power seems to be there as well? Actually, I mean, we all saw the Hosea Burton knockout. Did you just generally feel that 175 is definitely better for you?
Without a doubt, I think super middleweight was all about making the weight for me. Rather than kind of progressing and learning. Whereas now I'm at light heavyweight, it's all about I can tweak things, I can train hard, but I can look at my technique, I can look at kind of my power, I can really put in different kind of work. Whereas with super middleweight, it was constantly just a battle with the scales. And I think when you're kind of doing that and you're living and dying by the scales, then it takes your mind away from what you're in the game for, and that's to be a better fighter, not just to be able to make 12 stone. So for me now, it's all about being the best fighter I can be, and whether that means getting stronger, getting faster, getting fitter, improving my technique, improving my defense, then I can do all these things, and I have the energy. And when you've got the energy, you've got the enthusiasm. So when I was at super middleweight, I wouldn't want to put an extra session in a week, just focusing mainly on head movement or counter punching. Whereas when I'm at light heavyweight, I think I get to maybe say Saturday afternoon, I think, do you know what? I want to go and spend an hour just in front of the mirror practicing my head movement or getting my hands up and selecting different shots. So, yeah, it's exciting times for me.
Good stuff, good stuff. Now, unlike your previous bouts with Hosea Burton, and obviously we've all seen a gentleman that I'll come on to it in a little while. There doesn't really seem to be any trash talk between you and Callum Johnson. From what I can gather, you guys are friends, or have been friends, or you're not, it's not the typical sort of pre-fight dynamic.
No, I mean I respect Callum Johnson. I've known him a long time. I mean, I wouldn't say we're friends, but I certainly respect him, and I admire him. And I've always been I'd say I've always been a fan of him. When he turned pro and he was doing well, he was obviously the weight above. I was pleased for him, and as I say, there's no real trash talk or animosity between us. But when it comes to fight night, the respect we'll put to one side, and we'll go in there and we'll have a tear up and we'll have a fight, and it'll be the best man wins. But as I say, yeah, I've got a lot of time and respect for Callum Johnson. I rate him highly as a fighter, and yeah, I expect it to be a very entertaining fight.
Absolutely. This potentially, because remember this fight, this as much as it's it's for the British light heavyweight title. If you win this, you win the Lonsdale belt outright. But this potentially is going to open up a couple of big doors for you. Just really quickly, boxing groups across the world, you see a lot of different fight fans saying a lot of different things. Why? I mean, in other countries, their national title doesn't seem to hold as much weight as, say, the Lonsdale belt. Just why, if you can tell fight fans, just why is that British Lonsdale belt so special to British boxers?
I think because obviously British boxing is very, very strong, especially at the domestic level, and we've got the small hall shows that kind of come up to the massive venues, and for, I don't know whether it's the prestige or the fact that the British Border Control is a very strict board and they do things properly. It makes life more difficult to kind of go through the ranks and be worthy of then challenging for the title. So yeah, there's probably more hurdles to get over to get to it, and then obviously you've got a lot of good fighters competing for it, and then to win it outright, you have to have 3 successful defences against, again, worthy opponents, and I've been very fortunate. I've beat 3 undefeated fighters so far in my quest to win it outright, and then Callum Johnson be the 4th, and it'll be the first time in boxing history that's been done. So
that just makes that much more for you, doesn't it? Just
exactly, yeah.
Just right there to go ahead and to make a little bit of history and get your name in the history books. It just makes that fight it makes that fight that much bigger. So hopefully, and I like Callum Johnson, respect him as a fighter. I've followed you for quite a while. Christ, when was the first fight I ever saw you fight? I think it was well before Chudinoff. I mean, it's going back a while back when you was middleweight. So hopefully you come through, but there's various reasons for that. The next fight for you would make the logical sense, right? And that is the rematch with Hosea Burton. But because obviously you're both promoted by Eddie Hearn, he stepped up to cruiserweight. Do you think, should you get past Callum Johnson, that he's going to want that rematch with you?
Well, himself and Joe Gallagher, they was calling for the rematch as soon as I beat him. And my simple response was, well, I don't owe you a rematch. You didn't want to fight me whilst you had the title. You didn't want to give me a voluntary defence. I had to get myself into a mandatory position. And I came to your hometown. I was certainly up against it. I wasn't promoted by Eddie Hearn at the time, so I was a lone wolf. I was managed by Steve Goodwin, but that was the only kind of support I had aside from my training team. So I had it hard to get to that position. I thought, well, do you know what? I've won it. I'm not going to do them any favours because they made it very difficult for me. So unless he was a mandatory, I'm not going to give him that fight. But having said that, once I've won it outright, I'll gladly defend it again for a 5th and final time against Jose Burton. But I have a very strong feeling that I'll be doing a better number on him than I did firsthand. It's something that they forget that I was out of the ring for 6 months. It was only my 2nd fight at light heavyweight. I was with a new training team. I was away from home. Well, the boot will be on the other foot this time. So I feel like I've improved with every fight, and I've certainly been working on a few things that I think is going to surprise the boxing world.
Well, you've gone through a lot of training changes, haven't you, over your career? I mean, I think originally, you trained by Don Charles now.
Yep.
obviously with Paschal Collins for a couple of years, and before that you were trained by Mark Tibbs down in London. So throughout your career, there's not really been that sort of, I suppose, consistency of training. So obviously you've moved across, you've tried different things. So you seem to be in the best position that I think that you've probably done for your whole career.
Yeah.
The Jose Burton knockout was it was certainly something special. Flat on the back.
For me, it felt like destiny. I joined Don Charles. That was my second fight with him, and everything was kind of clicking in camp. And then to go out there and pull that victory out of the bag, because it was a tough fight, and it was very even going into it. I think I was down on the cards. I was drawing on one card, and I was down on the other two. So I needed the knockout, or at least 2 knockdowns. And I went and pulled it out of the bag, and it felt like destiny. And in my opinion, I'm not going to be beaten at light heavyweight. I'm gonna go on to become a world champion, and I'll reign for a long time. And I'm very confident about the work that I've been putting in, and I expect a lot of people to be taking the claims that I'm making seriously once they see the new improved Frank Buglioni.
Well, I hope so, because I mean, in terms of, if you look down the history of British fighting, British boxing champions, John Conte aside, we've not really had a heavyweight star. I mean, Calzaghe stepped up and had a couple of fights against Bernard Hopkins and a very faded Roy Jones Jr. Obviously, John Conte. Nathan Cleverly went up and did a little bit of business, but he's come off on the losing against Badly Jack and lost his title last year. Kendall Woods. But that was sort of 10, 15 years ago. So we're sort of looking for our next British light heavyweight star, and hopefully you are it. I'm going to throw a gentleman's name in, Frank, because we've all seen you go at it on Twitter, whether this is for the British title, whether it's not. Anthony Yarde. When obviously the promotional issues, Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn don't necessarily work together so well. We've not seen too many fights where they've collaborated on. Is that a fight, once you've got put business aside past Callum Johnson, if you want to take on Hosea Burton, is that fight gonna happen at some point in the next 12 months?
I would like to think so. On my end, I'm very much up for that fight, because I believe beating Anthony Yarde puts me as the very best light heavyweight in the country, no questions asked. And by doing that, it steps me up onto the European scene with no questions. I believe I'm at that level at the moment, but for the wider public, and in terms of all the boxing rankings, I think it makes logical sense for that fight to happen. In my honest opinion, they don't want that fight. Tunde he's protecting. He's a very fussy matchmaker. He's protecting Anthony Yarde, who's his golden goose. Anthony Yarde possibly wants to fight, but I'm sure if your trainer doesn't have confidence in your ability or in other aspects of your game, then those doubts can creep into your own mind, and that's what I think we'll see with Anthony Yarde. We've only got to look at the opponents they're picking. They're not picking anyone that can punch. They're not picking anyone that's remotely dangerous. They're not picking anyone that has real incentive to come and win and to put up a fight, or even like a risk taker. They're kind of all guys that don't take risks. So, yes, for me, it's not a 50-50 fight. It's heavily in my favour. But, to the general public, it's a 50-50, and many people are touting Yarde as the favourite. But believe you me, when it comes to it, my supporters, they're going to make a lot of money, and we're going to prove a lot of people wrong.
Well, we saw it in his last fight, actually. Interestingly, I mean, the guy that he shared the ring with, I can't pronounce his name off the top of my head, and I'm not even going to try. But we'd seen this guy. This guy had been in against world class opposition, and Yarde came in, but he got hit an awful lot. And I've noticed this actually in Yarde's fights, and I take your point. He does get tagged a fair bit. And if he gets tagged a fair bit against someone that's disciplined and someone that carries pop like yourself, then it could be game over for him.
Well, I mean, I believe that moving into this year, I've dealt with an ongoing injury. I've mentioned it a couple of times. I haven't mentioned the details of it, but as I say, my power is back to where it once was. And if I'm landing these right hands against these sort of opposition, the likes of Yarde, Burton, who I know I've got the hurting of, Callum Johnson, when I land my shots, they're going to know about it, and when I hit them, they're going to stay hit. and you're going to see a lot of knockouts this year.
Because you're both you and Yard are both ranked by the IBF. If I've got my numbers right, I think you're ranked number 7, and I think Yard is ranked number 13. So that fight's a fight that makes a lot of sense. I mean, once you're done with this, and if Yard doesn't play ball and doesn't agree to fight you, then what's the logical step? You're relative, you're highly ranked, because obviously the IBF's got. I mean, Artabea's their champion, but their 1 and 2 spots aren't rated. You've got Yoga Bravery that's still in there at number 4, who's actually, he's just come back out of the World Boxing Super Series quarterfinal and lost he's got the semi-final against Callum Smith coming up. Badu Jack, who we know is fighting, or should be fighting him if he ever finds a pen, is Adonis Stevenson. And they got Dominic Vassell, and then it's you.
Yeah.
So it's in actual practice, you're not a million miles away from perhaps getting that mandatory IBF shot.
Exactly. And as I say, the fights I want are Callum Johnson, Jose Burton, Anthony Yard. I want to, as I've said before, I want to completely wipe out the domestic light heavyweight scene. I want to show that I'm a cut above, and I'm going to go on to become the world champion out of the top domestic fighters at light heavyweight. But if they don't want those fights, and I don't blame them for not wanting them, then I'll go on for European and fringe world level, and I'll get myself into mandatory positions, and I'll fight for a world title. It probably won't be as quick as what people expect. I think it'll probably be early 2019. Because I'd like this Callum Johnson fight and then another 2 fights this year, whether it be a big domestic clash or a European fringe world level, and then I'd like to fight for a world title in 2019. But what we're going to find out is that if Jose Burton and Anthony Yard fights don't come off, it's not down to me and it's not down to the promoting team, because Eddie Hearn has already made clear that he's very willing to make the fights with Jose Burton and Anthony Yard. So we'll know then that it's not because of myself, it's because of Anthony Yard or Jose Burton don't want the fights.
Well, you've been very vocal yourself as well. I mean, you're obviously on Eastwood Boxing UK right now, and I've seen in a couple of other interviews that you're saying a very similar thing. So it's certainly not for the want of trying, Frank. And I hope that obviously those fights go off. And, we all hope that we all want to see you in world title shots next year. I'm pretty sure that I'm conscious that we've not got much of your time. There's a couple of fight predictions actually I want from you, Frank. The first one, let's do 3 actually. So obviously we've got the World Boxing Super Series. Alexander Usyk and Marius Briedis is coming up this Saturday. What's your take on that fight? Who wins that?
I think Usyk. He does something that's not quite. He doesn't stick to the basics. Briedis again. He's a very good fighter, unbeaten. Hasn't done anything wrong. But I think someone that's a little bit more elusive, tricky, and unorthodox that Usyk is. I think he might unravel it a bit. Hometown, so it's going to be interesting. But I lean towards Usyk, yeah, for sure. And I think it'll be a points because Briedis is a very tough, very strong man.
Oh, he is. He's great. But probably, I think that the speed and the skill is definitely with Usyk. But in terms of that raw power in either hand, that definitely goes to Briedis. And we'll see whether that hometown crowd's going to play. The second one is a card with one of your stablemates on it, and that's the British Beef card on the 3rd of Feb at the O2. I know it's your stablemate, but if you could try and be as impartial as you can. Lawrence Okoli, Isaac Chamberlain, where's that going?
Again, I think certainly the power and the ferociousness of Lawrence Okoli could well lean towards an early stoppage, but if he doesn't get him out of there early, then I've got to lean towards a Chamberlain for a late stoppage or a points victory, because if Okoli doesn't get him out of there and he's throwing big shots, could wear himself out. It's going to be a very interesting one. That is a real 50-50, and if you ask me today, I might say Chamberlain. You ask me tomorrow, I'll say Okoli. So that's a hard one. I'll probably sit on the fence with that one if I can.
I thought you might do, funnily enough. The last one. Let's pop back to your old division. Fight that I'm probably looking forward to the most over the next 3 months. George Groves, Chris Eubank Jr.
Yes, very good fight. Again, another. You know what? I wouldn't call it 50-50. I'd say 60-40 in George Groves' favour, because I've said before how important and how vital experience is. And Jules Groves has got that big fight experience. He's had the pressure on him before. He's rose to the occasion. He's been around Jules Groves, and he's a very, very good fighter. I've done a lot of sparring with George. Unfortunately, not for this fight. I said I'd be more than happy to help him out, but they didn't need me for this one. But yeah, I'll lean to George Groves. Chris Eubank, he's certainly got the speed, but I don't think he carries enough power to really trouble George Groves. Whereas I think George Groves carries enough power to trouble Chris Eubank. I also think timing beats speed, and that's something that George Groves has. So he's very fast, Chris Eubank Jr., but timing beats it, and precision beats power. And I also think George Groves is accurate, especially with that jab and that right hand. So it might be a boring fight. It might not be the fight that we're all kind of expecting it to take fire. I mean, George Groves may just box and move and keep him at the end of his jab and crash the right hand in if he takes too much of a forward momentum. So yeah, I'm leaning towards a George Groves points. I think Eubank's got a very good chin, but I also think Eubank, if he feels that he could be hurt, I don't think he'll engage. So I don't think he'll get knocked out. I think he'll survive, and George Groves will win it on points.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is a proper breakdown from a professional boxer. I have seen so much. I mean, you'd be surprised, Frank, actually. There's just, it's not even, you know, if you were looking 60-40, the general overwhelming view from fight fans is that this is Chris Eubank Jr.'s, and this is Chris Eubank Jr.'s easy. And I don't agree with that, and I've got myself into many online debates. Some of them have got very, very heated. So I'm glad that we've got a proper perspective on this. Listen, Frank, it's been really great to talk to you. Thanks so much for taking the time out to speak to us. And we wish you well in your next fight.
Thanks very much. Thanks for a great interview, and I appreciate your patience waiting for me to get on the line.
No problem at all, Frank. Take care.
Cheers, mate. All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Guys, there we go. That was British light heavyweight champion Frank Buglioni. As always, Eastwick Boxing UK is in association with Three Kings Boxing, sponsored by The Movement. Shout out to all the boxers and all the guys and the fight fans out there. What else to say, really? Make sure that you catch Frank's fight live on Sky Sports on March the 24th. It's on the undercard of the Dillian White-Lucas Brown fight. Up until next time, guys, we'll see you all soon.